Yeah, the Peloton that's never been used from COVID.
It's not the
Drying racks
drying
now. Yes. Well, since we
rack.
had lots of kids, I got relegated to the storage room. That's become my office.
That's perfect.
Well, you need to go out and buy a treadmill so that you have
Uh,
more drying space, Ross.
This is the Tapped In Podcast, the podcast for beverage distributors that want to empower their sales team to drive business results. Well, listen up and welcome back to another episode of the Tapped In Sales Podcast, your podcast for beer distributors by beer distributors. I'm here. I'm your host, Bud. We have Mikey, Road Mikey, on the road all week this week. And then we have our new Moneyball Ross here today, founder of VXP, new member of the pod, and we're excited to have you join us today, Ross. This is going to be episode 52. We've been doing this for a whole year, Mikey. Can you believe that?
Oh, wow. That happened quick, man. That's
I
awesome.
was looking at the last podcast. I saw that number. I was shocked.
Yeah, you were shocked. And we're all shocked too, as well. So, Ross, welcome to the pod, my man.
And before we started recording, we couldn't figure out how to get the background to go because I'm stuck here in the storage room at the house with the Peloton that's never been used back there as the drying rack.
It's a perfect.
I had to do a little cleanup here before we started. And then I got my wife's workout routine on the mirror behind me right there too.
I was wondering what that. I thought that was a to-do list. I was trying to read
it is
it.
a to-do list. It is a to-do list for the workout that never happens here in the storage room as well.
Oh,
Have kids get kicked out of your office and get moved to the storage room. That's my
Yep.
advice for everybody.
on
Yep.
brand. Well, you know, the garage, the house, the garage or the shed, I'm in the padded room with nothing around me as well in the room. So I get the brand for sure, but not the kids. Don't have the kid part. Mikey's the only one with the design skills and the setup to manage this as well, for sure, as well as he
Yeah, I
does
had to
with your
find a nice-
studio setup.
I had to find a nice blank canvas, no Pelotons here, to throw in the background, but I found a nice black wall as a background. So
It's perfect. It's perfect.
Well, I think we owe you, and the industry owes you a thank you for this week.
What is that?
Well, the legislative conference ended on the 9th, and it was the same day the tariffs got pulled away.
It's totally true.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you guys obviously made an impact in DC.
Bud was out there just working his ass off, did it for America.
Did it for America.
Did it for
So
America.
how did you convince Trump to pull him back?
You know, we went to his, so we're there about a couple weeks ago. They have this whole plan. You know, you're going to do Sunday night welcome reception. Monday is going to be distributor only meeting. And then we're going to do a reception that night. And then Tuesday is always the cheers event. Last night, whatever it is, which is at one of the big cool areas. We've done it at the Smithsonian. We've done it at what's the Library of Congress, and a bunch of cool places for that. So it's always something cool centric. And they flip-flopped the days because on Tuesday, Trump was hosting his Republican dinner for all the Republican legislators on the Senate and the House. So that means that half of the crew in DC, all the Republicans were going to go to the White House for dinner with Trump, and only the Democrats were going to show up. And that's not good when we're trying to, work these issues across both aisles. So we flip-flopped everything to Monday. And so I just skipped out on everything on Tuesday and just crashed the dinner and just coached my boy up there.
Nice. Well, it works. It works.
Somebody invited me to a Signal chat. I got a QR code to get slid in, and I just scanned the QR code at the front door and just bounced right in there, right?
Boom. Well, good work, man. We owe you a thank you for sure.
I love it. Well, Ross, now we're, this is kind of an introduction. Many of our clients know you, but not all of the listeners know you. So I wanted to kind of check in and, maybe do like a little introduction on you, your background, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to begin. Started in the wine and beer distributor side of the business, specifically major brands in St. Louis, Missouri. Because as everybody knows, in the beer industry, all roads always lead back to St. Louis. So that's a fact. But I cut my teeth there. That business is now known as part of Breakthrough. And during my time there, We ended up acquiring, I say we, Major Brands acquired a Anheuser-Busch distributor in the Pac Northwest. And as the recession came upon us, the 0708 recession, it made sense for me to move out there and help try to improve the situation with that business. Turn around a few years later, basically a year and a half later, that business got sold off after a pretty nice turnaround. And a lot of that had to do with focusing on profitability, which was kind of the spark which led to what is VXP today. Once that business got spun off, I made the decision to start essentially two businesses under one umbrella. One was supplier focused, and that was Craft Portal, which is a product designed, or was a product designed to facilitate ordering and forecasting between suppliers and distributors, with a focus towards the craft side of the business and giving them the tools that the large MCAB houses had. That business eventually became what today is known as OrderStream under the umbrella of VIP. And if anybody's on the supplier side listening, I mean, it's a great product. It's definitely worth looking at. But in conjunction with that, started VXP with a focus on what is the profitability, volume, and finished product loss side of the VXP program today. So that's kind of my business history.
We got together and got hooked up with you, me, and Mikey because when VXP, we were a client first, and we got an email from you or Gavin that was basically like, how would you like to grow your GP per CE by 20 cents a case next year? And my response was, you have my attention.
The best part of all is, I mean, you guys for 52 episodes have been spitting out the Kool-Aid. So that was the moment when you guys started to drink the Kool-Aid. So I guess what in reality, what the real position I am is the cult leader. The VXP cult leader. So hopefully this doesn't end up like Jonestown. But the idea is, I sold you guys on the Kool-Aid and you've been selling it ever since. So
we are the cult leader. Buckle up, grab your Technicolor Dream Goat, and let's go.
Yeah.
There's no comments, no comments, sneakers, or Kool-Aid in this party. Just profitability.
There's a new TV show. If anybody's watched this yet, it's on Apple TV, and it's called The Studio. And Seth Rogen plays a studio head, and he's been charged to make a movie about Kool-Aid. So Martin Scorsese comes to him and says, "I want to make a movie about Jonestown." And he knows he's got to make this dumb Kool-Aid movie. And now we've got Jonestown, and Martin Scorsese says, we need to make this movie about Jonestown. And he says, cool, I'll buy the script for $10 million, Seth Rogen's character, but you have to call it Kool-Aid. And that's how he's going to get this movie made and this Kool-Aid movie made, which then the whole thing falls apart. It's a hilarious first episode. We haven't watched anymore, but that's the good Kool-Aid segment. It's called The Studio. Apple.
All right. Shit. Like Apple is the one streaming service I don't have.
I mean, it's only another $8 a month.
It's funny because we're on the technology side, but we can still make fun of this. But the whole idea of streaming was sold to us that it was going to be cheaper and better.
Yes.
Now it's more expensive and worse because I can't find anything.
But what you can do is that you can just cancel one and pick it back up later instead of having to call Comcast every year and be like, I paid my bill on time in full every month, and you're tripling it, but you're giving the new guy off the street $4 a month.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you call them once a month or once a year and you threaten to cancel because somebody else is cheaper, then they give you the deal. Then you got to call them back the next year.
Just grind away at it over and over and over again. Grind away. Well, Ross, with all the work we've been doing with clients lately, tell us a little bit about, we've been talking about Q1 on the pod. You've been listening. We've been talking about state of the industry, state of the economy. Talk to us a little bit about where your view is, because your background in college, too, is you've got a big economics background as well, too. So you come at this from a economics and an academic side a little bit differently than maybe some of us in the industry as well.
Yeah, I think that I don't want this to come off as, obviously we have VXP as a product and obviously don't want this to come off as salesy, but I think to understand how I kind of view things, I'm going to kind of run it through the lens of that. Before I go there, anything you guys want to finish or talk about as far as the tariffs are concerned coming off at the end of the call last week?
I mean, tariffs are off. So now we see some of it's on related. I mean, like, we talk about it internally with clients. We've talked about it here, but at the end of the day, like, it's just moving so fast. It's tough for us knuckleheads to kind of manage it and keep track of it. And at the end of the day, there's a group of people that really appreciate it and are excited about, and there's a group of people that just academically think this is the dumbest thing that you could ever do. Do you want to layer on any more opinions too, Ross?
I mean, I sent you the meme in Slack this week. I mean, it's the gladiator. Are you not entertained?
Yes.
I mean, I have, I'm not a huge, I try to stay away from social media, but my gosh, it's been a fun week to watch.
My favorite memes are because we're all in that same age group, that kind of core millennial group. And it's like, oh, we've been through, this is our fourth major chaos. We're supposed to do this, once in our lifetime. And we've been through it 4 times. And the one you sent me last night, Ross, it's like, oh, your first time with your noose around.
With the noose, the guy hanging. First time.
I'll have to drop that in here.
Yeah.
Oh, it's your first time. This is too bad.
My gut tells me this isn't over, and I think that it's going to be transformational, just like COVID was. And I think we're just going to have to roll and be flexible.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what my gut tells me is, COVID, it was all of a sudden no more draft sales, and everybody had to adapt. And maybe tomorrow it's no more Chinese microbrews, because it's such a huge segment of the market.
For sure.
But
and for Americans, we're the biggest buyers of the world in the globe. We're the best shoppers in the globe. So, like, the academic in me, which is like tariffs are bad, which makes sense on paper, but when you comes to rubber meeting the road, that trading partner has jobs that they have to support, and you're going to see folks make decisions around how they're going to price products and how they're going to integrate with the new tariff program to still sell their products into this market. And that's where that business owner and that operator is going to make those decisions that are going to be independent of what any one government does or doesn't do. And then also you're going to see people like Israel is a first example so far that I've seen that takes their tariffs to 0 for U.S. goods. You're going to see people that are going to play that game, and it's just going to be weird and interesting to see how that kind of game theory plays out.
Yeah, I think game theory is the right perspective. And again, you harping back to my background, and I think, not to get too macro here, but I think macro makes sense here. And the thing to think about is uncertainty makes people nervous. And I think we've seen in the trends, I think you guys have had some podcasts talking about it. And I think we've seen it with our customers that there's been a slowdown in the last, I would say 90 days.
90 days for sure.
The consumer's pulling back. And, if you're uncertain about hiring, maybe you'll delay that decision. Or if you're thinking about hiring, or you're thinking about expansion. Even on a little basis, like if you're thinking about renovating your house, or maybe you're going to push it back and just to see what happens with raw materials. Well, that's somebody else's job. That's somebody else's income. That's the same guy that's walking in the store buying the 6-pack.
Yeah.
So I think we need to be cognizant as an industry that uncertainty leads to slowdown. It in itself doesn't maybe cause a problem, but people get nervous. They tend to spend less, which slows the wheels down. And on one hand, you could say, well, great, that means we're going to have a recession. But we don't know what the Fed's going to do, right? So if the Fed starts printing money, which that very well may happen, then we could have inflation again. But if the Fed does nothing, maybe we have deflation. So I think it goes back to what I said is, I think we just have to be flexible and take the roll with the punches. And what a great time to be on a podcast to talk about it, because it is going to be gladiator every freaking week here for the rest of the year.
It is, yeah. We've watched the last 60 to 90 days just in the industry just take a huge dive, and and client to client, they think it's a local area thing. It's just their territory or it's just their brands, but it's an industry wide issue right now. And then when people start tightening up the pocketbooks because of the uncertainty, the first thing to go is typically the alcohol. They're not going out to the restaurants. They're not going out to bars. They're not picking up a 30-pack or a 24-pack at the grocery store like they typically do, or even that $12 6-pack. It's just the first thing to get cut from the budget for most folks, and we're seeing it firsthand unfold. So, I mean, now that we've pulled this back, I mean, who knows? Is it going to come back? How fast is it going to come back? Will people start loosening up? What will we see over the next 60 to 90 days?
You've been on the trade the last couple of weeks, Mike. I mean, are people? I mean, are the reps talking about consumers changing buying habits? I know this podcast is about me and me coming back, but I'm actually genuinely curious.
Yeah, no, consumer buying habits hasn't changed. I think we've seen a slowdown in some high end stuff, a little bit maybe more of a shift towards value brands, but also just not the, you go to the grocery store and you don't need a case of beer, but you buy a case of beer to have it in the refrigerator. Maybe somebody's coming over just to have it. I think that a lot of that has slowed down. I've been in a lot of accounts over the last 4 days, and just looking at, pulling up in the app, looking at the last 90 days as far as performance, volume in GP, and it's a lot of negatives, account to account, and it's all channels, convenience, packaged liquor, supermarkets, grocery stores, it's everywhere.
Yeah. We talked to a client earlier in March, Mike, when we were talking about like what is the impact on immigration and some of the ICE opinions or some of the ICE activity out there is a better way to say it. And the response back from the client was, where was all the new business when all these people showed up? Like if
Yeah,
you, if it
yeah,
was,
exactly.
in it's anecdotal, but it's also truthful. Is that if it was that positive, if it's that negative, it must be that positive then too. And
Hmm.
where was all the new business when they showed up too? So that was an interesting perspective that I hadn't thought about as well.
I mean, I think the key element in going back to what I said is that I think the ability to be loose and flexible and fluid is going to be important.
Hmm.
The ability to move quickly and move quickly at the point of retail. And I think you said it really well in the last podcast when you said that there's going to be winners and losers. And as a sales force on the front end, you're going to have to quickly adapt to those changes. And again, here's where okay, here comes the sales pitch. Um, but VXP is designed to be that system at the front end that allows the reps to be entrepreneurial and make those decisions and adjust quickly, right?
Yep.
And again, this is going to help you understand like why I'm so die hard into this philosophy to the point where I built a business around it, and I got these chuckleheads to drink my Kool-Aid. Is that is that you think about it I'll create an analogy here. So one of my favorite quotes is often attributed to like Winston Churchill being, free market capitalism is the best or the worst system ever, ever implemented, except every other one has been tried. And why it works for the most part, and on most parts important, is that it it acknowledges the fact that a market is of millions and millions of people making decisions every single day with their hard-earned money. They're walking in and they're making a decision around quantity, quality, price point, where they see it in the store, how it's merchandised. And it's a million different decisions that are made every single day. And, the closest we can get to that point of decision is our frontline sales reps
Hmm.
and optimizing around meeting the customer where they are. And the reality is our customer is moving around a lot right now, and so are our suppliers. So that ability to move quick at the point of decision is pretty critical in my mind. I mean, even in the absence of the uncertainty, um, it generates the best outcomes, and it's based on what we've seen in the data, and it's what theoretically are you know what we it's what we've seen work in the data and what we believe to be the most effective way.
Yeah, and we watched, not to cut not to cut you off, but to add to that point of being able to pivot and be on your toes, change on a dime. We watched a lot of craft brewers, even large brewers, during the craft boom and at the end of the craft boom, and the whole market was just shifting. The ones that succeeded were the ones that were able to pivot right away, on their toes, ready to just change with the market. And the ones that really didn't succeed were the ones that just stuck with their ways and continued doing the way things were doing, and pushing everything else. So exactly what you said, to be able to just be on your toes, pivot on a dime, change to changing market conditions, and be there. Even breweries that was draft only, and then all of a sudden the market's going towards 19.2s and cans. It's
Yeah.
like boom, all right, let's get this, let's get the cans, right? So being able to do that with our sales reps, with the data of EXP, of course, in the account is crucial in a market like this.
Well, let's look at like Boston beer. How many times has Jim Cook and that crew reinvented themselves?
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
and then you can see New Belgium, and they've reinvented themselves around an IPA first, which they never really wanted to make, and then double reinvented themselves around the packaging that they put that IPA in 19.2, and then triple reinvented it by actually telling people that this is an IPA when it's an FMB and pumping 9% alcohol into it. And I still remember when when our new Belgian rep comes in like 2020 and is like, we're crushing it with 19.2s when that's happening, and he's like, I don't know how we call this an IPA. It's basically a pineapple juice with alcohol in it.
Yeah, which is true. It is true, and that's why you can crush them like they're 3% or 0% juice, and all of a sudden you're wasted because it's 9.5%.
And I remember being with a rep in kind of like a socioeconomically depressed area in not a very nice neighborhood, and it was like, hey, we should try Voodoo Ranger 19.2s. And he's like, are you serious? I'm like, there's nothing else that's craft in here, number one. There's nothing else that's 19.2, number two. And you have 2 or 3 of them that are more than 8%. This is perfect. And he's like, bro, I've never thought about those because I'm worried about the out of date. And I said, bro, I gave my business card. I said, bro, if these go out of date, you call me. I will pay you back for them. And he's never called me. He's never called me. They will not go out of date. Just send them one of each. Get us the 3 spots and let it rip and see what happens.
Oh, yeah.
You gotta love it. You gotta love it. So, the worst system except for all the others, and that kind of front end acknowledgement. So what's that look like to you, Ross, when you talk about a rep making that best decision at retail in a perfect world? Where does that come to you, and where do you find it I call ourselves true believers. Where do you see that as a true believer in the process?
Yeah, I'm going to say something controversial here. I'm going to say that I don't like incentives. And that's really funny for me to say sitting here as we're selling a good chunk of the product we sell is an incentive tool. But I think it's important to acknowledge that. And it's also important to acknowledge that the world isn't as clear and pristine as you would think, or academic as you want it to be. I can sit here and say that I know that VXP in its purest form drives the best outcomes. But we don't live in a world that's, perfectly clear like that. And if I look at it like as a spectrum, on one hand, you've got complete, essentially free market entrepreneurial aspect of VXP. On the far side of that, you got total top-down control, which basically starts with the supplier and incentives moving towards the middle, which is the distributor themselves and basically objectives. And the best way I can analogize this is if we go back to the 90s, the whole idea of top-down worked extremely well. So I'm not going to sit here and say that VXP would have been the best solution back then. Because back then, you basically had 2 big suppliers fighting it out. You had 20 SKUs, and that big supplier was 95% of your sales, and you're going to war. It was just you versus them. You're slugging it out, and you were tightly intertwined with your primary supplier. I mean, it's like if our industry were an economy, it'd be like going to war in like World War II. I want 1 million tanks, I want 50,000 bombers, and we need to get it done.
We need a trillion bullets.
And they're like, cool, we're going to make that. The world's different now. Now we don't have one enemy, right? We have hundreds of suppliers we're competing against. We've got thousands of SKUs. And the whole idea of top-down management kind of falls apart when it's not everybody lined up together in one vertical fighting against one opponent. And I think that's putting it on the extremes, right? Because if we look at the system we live in, like as a country, we don't live in a perfectly market system, right? There's a federal government, there's a state government, and just like that, we've got suppliers, and we as the distributors are kind of closer, we're more localized, and then we have our reps down at the front end. So we're kind of similar in that structure, and you can't be 100% market, and you can't be 100% top-down control, right? And from my perspective, it was if the world's gonna be what it is, and there's gonna be incentives and there's gonna be objectives, then we need it to function as efficiently and effectively as possible, right? I am 100% focused on outcome-based solutions. And if we're going to have this as part of our world, which it's going to be part of our world, then we need to make sure it's clear, it's transparent, it's timely. And, I think that's what we've built. And I think that's why we have so much traction now with that product. I think that, diving, double clicking into the incentive side, I think that as the pie has started to shrink, and I think we can all agree that the pie has started to shrink, right? Drinking habits are changing. There's uncertainty in the market. And I think that the suppliers, they're trying to get attention, and they're fighting over a smaller piece of the pie. And their lever they're looking at is marketing dollars, incentives, right? And I think as more and more are fighting out over that smaller pie, and we've got more incentives coming in, there's a couple things happening. One is, I think, as the dollars to return ratio is reducing, right? So the amount of money I'm spending versus what's happening is reducing. So there, it's important for us to make sure if we're going to spend the supplier's money, and if we're going to co-opt it with our money, we sure better make sure it's a good investment.
Yeah.
Right. That we're getting the return that we want, and we're doing right by our supplier, making sure they're getting what they need to get out of it. And I think that the other problem that's started to happen is because as these incentives have become more volumetric, and a lot of these new suppliers are coming in with marketing dollars, and they only care about revenue growth, and it's not necessarily about the bottom line because they're in that growth mode. And what we've ended up with is a disproportionate amount of our compensation tied up in incentives. And there's a little bit of a, I know there's going to be some people nodding their head when I say this, that there's a little bit of the tail wagging the dog. And we're getting a little bit away from making the best decisions at that point of decision that I talked about, at the point of retail. So again, making sure that we're funneling all this into a place that lines up with effective outcomes, and making sure that if we're doing what we're doing, that we're doing so as effectively as possible. I know it's not going away. I mean, I'm not, a radical purist here. But if we're going to do it, let's make sure we do it right. And I think that's why we made such a great product is, partially, but you're an incredibly pragmatic person. And on the other side is, what better person to create it than the person that hates it?
That's true. Yes. Which is you.
That's me.
For me, the challenge that we always have with clients around incentives. So analogy for the listeners is that we've got, your commission structure or your variable, every box counts as volume and profit components or volume and revenue components. Then you got your objectives. Those are the things that are PFP, the things that in our world suppliers are not funding. It's distributor fully funding these things. And then when we talk about incentives as a term, those are the things that suppliers are funding in some way, shape, or form. And that incentive component to the tail wagging the dog, it's just turned into a mess where distributors are more saying yes rather than asking qualifying questions around whether I should or shouldn't do it, and starting to challenge suppliers. And the reason why they're having these challenges is that we have this structure in the 3-tier system where we feel compelled as operators to support all of our business partners. And I can understand that from a piece of the puzzle, but we have smarter, better ways to support those partners of ours with the tools that are out there, and even just asking some intelligent questions around what are you looking to get out of it? Because a lot of the times it's just not asking the question to get the best results is what's tripping the industry over using those resources and those dollars the best way. And more often, you've heard this from Mike, you've heard this from Ross, and we've heard this from clients. Like if you just start asking questions, you get different responses from suppliers. You just need a little bit of creative friction to make the changes that you're looking for.
Yeah, and incentives are not a one size fits all. So if it's an incentive for a supplier that's nationwide, that's not going to fit every market. So when you first see the incentive, like you said, ask some questions, form it for your market. How is this going to drive sales in my particular market, best for my operation?
Yeah.
And reconfigure it. Take the same amount of dollars, take the same overall goal, right? And just reconfigure of how are we going to actually drive these results with this same structure or with the overall structure.
I mean, it's got to be an ROI conversation. It really does.
It does.
And that's where that profitability element comes in. The velocity times profitability and how much margin you're making. And I think that you know, yeah, it's just it's become and this from a supplier perspective, you're looking at it and thinking, okay, I got to if I just make it more complicated, more creative around how I structure this, then the reps are going to pay attention. When it's completely the opposite, which is it's about transparency and clarity, and it starts with a conversation around return on investment. It's actually I've got a funny story from way back when I was running my distributor. I'm gonna tell the story because it's changed a lot since then, but the story sums it up perfectly. Had a supplier come in and they were super excited. We're gonna run this incentive, and first place is a trip to Europe, second place is a $500 check, third place is like 250. So can I sign you up for half the price, right? So it's the total prize pool is $14,000. Your portion just seven. And I'm looking at them and I said, let me look at what we're selling on your product and our margin. So I spun the paper around it and I slid it across the table. I said, we make in profitability $500 a month total on your supplier. You're making roughly, maybe if you're lucky, maybe that or maybe double that if you're lucky.
Yeah.
How is this a good idea for either of us? Explain this to me. Why don't you just give me a better margin? Because that's the other piece of it. It was $1.50 a case on the stuff that we're making. And just for context, it cost us over $5 to deliver a case. Now you could look at it and say, well, I'm depriving the sales reps of a trip to Europe. But that's not the point, right? The point is to do what's right by the consumer, what the consumer wants, do right by the distributor, maximize what we're selling, the mix of what we're selling, and do right by the supplier. And quite frankly, if we would have done that, that would not have been doing right by the supplier.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Yep.
I think we see more and more of this today because we're not asking the hard questions as a supplier, as a distributor around, what is going to optimize the profitability for all of us, and what's the best thing for the consumer.
And when people come with those ideas, it's just a nice way to just ask back, just like, what is the ROI? What are we generating out of this? Instead, it's fallen into like, it's just a budget conversation. Well, I was allocated $7,000 for your wholesaler to draft an incentive plan for this quarter or for this year, and this is how I'm choosing to spend it. And you have a budget too, so like we just need to spend the budget, right? Instead of having a real collaborative conversation around what is the best money to spend, how should we spend it, how should we structure it. It starts from the top down of command and control, pushes the budget down through, and there's just a couple gaps, really important gaps in connecting the dots and saying, yeah, that's maybe not the right idea, or maybe that's not the best idea as well. We had a similar story where we had an RTD wholesaler that I should like anonymize this and post this somewhere. We would talk about this more in detail at some point, but he was like, hey, I want to focus on like this pod placement goal. And, you're making, $5.62 on our product in GP, which is like 50% more than beer. And I don't know why you wouldn't want to do this, was like basically the premise of the email. And I responded back and said, first, it's not 50% more. It's only like 30% more than our average beer GP per CE. And by the way, it's actually 50% less to 60% less than the RTD category, you loser, because I've told your customer, I've told your employers and your bosses that we don't make anything on your product. And why would I focus on yours when I could sell Neutral or Cutwater? And I will name those brands because we sold them. And we'll sell Neutral or Cutwater for $9 in GP per CE or $13 in GP per CE. Why would my reps take that product off the shelf and put yours on or dedicate any of their real estate to your products when they're moving faster at double to triple the profitability? So no, we are not doing it.
I remember that.
That was just a hard no for me. It wasn't even an ask or a question. That was just a no, you dumb.
Yeah.
That's a great example too, because even if you didn't have that conversation and you empower the frontline sales team to make that decision based on the data, they're gonna be the bad guy for you,
Mhm.
right? They're gonna choose the product that's gonna move faster at the higher profitability margin,
Yeah.
and again, it's better for the retailer because the retailer wants to sell more and their margins are pretty well lined up with yours, and it's better for the consumer because they're gonna pick up what they want to pick up,
Mhm.
and then you don't have to be the bad guy,
Yeah.
right? Now the supplier comes to you and says, "You guys are selling nothing." Well, yeah, but let me explain to you why, right? Let's have that conversation. And I don't, I don't, I'm not in charge of the market dynamics. You set a price, you set a margin, and now the reps are making the decisions that are rational to the market. Would you like to change those assumptions?
We've set up the maze and have dropped the cheese off. Our job is to show you where the maze goes, and you can decide if you want to drop your piece of cheese off or not. And
Yeah.
they're going to find their way through the maze. And we chose at Atlas, and you chose at your wholesaler, Ross, to just build a maze that makes sense. And that's
Yeah.
where
I
we work
mean,
with clients all day long now.
most of the suppliers out there, like you said, but I mean, the sales rep that's in charge for the area, they get a budget and they're like, hey, we
Yeah.
need an incentive. All right, cool. Let's do this. Let's do some pods, right? I'll pay you for each new placement that you get. Well, as sales reps, we all have those accounts where we can send any pod we want, right? And on site where I'm at now, there was a great example of that, and they all knew it. They're like, that's where incentives go to die. That's where your pod placements go. If you need a placement, the owner of the store just wants everything and will take everything. But that's not good for the supplier either, because now we're paying for these placements that don't make sense. They don't belong there. They don't belong in this account. They're not going to sell through. They're going to go out of code, right? And that's bad for the brand. As a supplier, I wouldn't want my product somewhere just sitting there dying when a customer walks in and you see dust all over it. Like, that must be junk, right? Nobody's buying it. It's not selling. It's old. It just doesn't make sense. And to be able to come back to the drawing board and say, let's take that budget, let's do something that makes sense. And the smart suppliers, and we had a couple of them, would come in and say, here's my budget for you guys. Let's work on something together. What do you think is really going to drive results? How can we use this money to accomplish what we want to and get the results that we need?
It goes back to that command and control thing that I said, right? It's the idea that, back in the 90s, it made a ton of sense. Impact selling was amazing, right? But the problem is with the fractured market we have now, you come in with that same command and control aspect, and I need 1,000 placements. Cool. Well, it's just like, hey, we need to produce a million. After the war, we need to produce a million tractors. Well, your people just want to eat food. So how do you know that's the right number? You don't, right? Only the market can tell you how many tractors they need to make the food that they need to, fill the grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
You can't manage that top down.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in a war, yes, you can, and you need to.
Yeah.
But if you're in a fractured market with a lot of different players and consumers making a million different decisions every day, it's really hard to be top down and get it right.
And,
Yeah.
and,
I've
and
heard I've heard multiple times on this trip alone, and just the trip that I was on last time, of how relieved the reps were to be getting away from an objective based PFP, where it's all placements, it's all and the incentives that are driving most of it. Because he's like, I'll be honest, I'm really good when we get a new product. I'm really good at getting it out there. I do my job. I get the placements where it needs to be. I do all that stuff. And then a month or two later, they come out with an incentive and pay for everybody for placements. Well, guess what? I lose my ass on the incentive because I was the one that got it out there in the first place without being paid. And the people that weren't doing it and they were, dragging behind, and now they're the ones that's cashing in on the incentive. When ultimately I did the right thing in the beginning and got it out there right away when it should have been.
that exact behavior has killed retailers. Like J.C. Penney
Yeah.
came to die because nobody would shop at Penny's until it was on sale. They always knew that they would overbuy and that they wouldn't go shop until it was on sale. J. Crew, another retailer that has struggled through this as well. People don't shop until stuff is on sale. So put that in the lens of that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Reps don't sell until it's on incentive. And you wonder why suppliers say, well, it doesn't work until it's on the incentive. Well, that's the rabbit hole that it's the maze you built. That's the traps that are out there. People responding to incentives. And if there is none, they will wait until that happens more often than not. These sales reps are not idiots. Like, they know what they're doing. They've figured this out faster than we have a lot of the times too. And that piece of the puzzle is just we got to build a better maze, and we got to build a better trap, and that's what we love doing every day, 100%. The other element too, Ross, where you're talking about like top down and command and control versus an inspire and enroll, all of that data is backed up, or that opinion is backed up with MBWA's productivity report, where in the late 90s, I think it was like this number is loosely from like 96 or 97's report, where the average wholesaler had like 5 or 6 different suppliers and like 200 SKUs in the late 90s. And that was like their portfolio complexity. And now the average supplier or average distributor has got 2,000 SKUs or 3,000 SKUs. I mean, our largest client has 6,000 SKUs, or at least in complexity of portfolio, and like 300 or 400 suppliers. Like, it's incredible. I think the average in the most one of the most recent DPSs, it's you've got about 50 to 60 suppliers and 1,000 to 1,500 SKUs on average wholesalers across the board. And I put it as like, how do you make an incentive for all of that? You just so complex market. There's just a lot of stuff going on. Yep. You miss out on opportunities by just programmatically managing it all that way in some way, shape, or form. Ross, anything else you want to add, my man, on your welcoming back into the VXP crew and the pod?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing is, I didn't talk a lot about myself, but also, maybe that's not why people listen. At the end of the day, my re-entry into this is, the timing couldn't be better. This product is in the right place at the right time, and I am incredibly excited. There is no better industry to be in than this, and the people in this space are just so much fun, and I couldn't be more thrilled to be back in this seat in this storage shed, talking to you guys and talking to clients and onboarding new people. So,
we'll have to see what's on the drying rack next week.
Yeah, you may not want to know. Maybe that's the thing. Whenever I come on or whenever I'm on, I'll just have a new article of clothing hanging there, and you guys can kind of guess what it is.
Maybe that'll drive more people to the YouTube channel too. So I think that's a great plan, Ross.
One of our best.
Gotta get those views up on the YouTube.
Gotta get the numbers up. One of our best episodes was when Mikey took his header and knocked himself out and gave himself a concussion. And we were meeting with a client the next week, and he's like, "Hey, are you doing okay?" And Mikey's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "When I heard you took that header, I quickly paused and ran to my office to go watch that video on YouTube." Yeah. So good.
So tune in next week to see what's on the drying rack.
Oh, I love it. It'll be fun to watch the evolution of the studio, of Ross's studio. We've seen Mike's evolution. Mine isn't going nowhere. I'm fat.
Mikey's looks like it's like a catalog. Everything is like white and pristine.
Mm-hmm. It is, yeah.
With LED lights. I love it.
Oh man.
Well, boys, until next week. Mikey, travel safe back home. We love it. You're out on the road and seeing new clients. We've got a story to tell from Mikey next week, so tune in for that as a little cliffhanger.
Yeah. You're not going to want to miss that. You're going to want to tune in next week to hear this story, because we ran out of time today, and it's a lengthy story. So we'll catch you up to speed next week. But yeah, it's pretty good.
I love it. Well, cheers, boys. Thanks for listening, crew.
Thanks all.
Cheers.